My name's Leslie Sprunger. I'm Associate Professor and Associate Dean at the Washington State University College of Veterinary Medicine. And I teach first-year veterinary students, so students who are in their very first year of training for the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine program. My personal definition of formative assessment is that it is essentially feedback, either a self-assessment or from peers or from an instructor, where the goal is just to help the learner get better at whatever it is that they're doing. Either if they're trying to understand conceptual material, that assessment is targeted at helping them understand better what they know and what they don't know and sort of where to target their efforts. They're in a professional program, and so they're making a transition in an educational standpoint from the undergraduate world to this is the training for their actual job that they're going to do. In my class, it's not just about teaching them the facts of gross anatomy, it's starting to get them to think about how they're going to use this information as a developing professional. And that's where the role of formative assessment can come in, because for things like skills development or the sort of understanding of professional values or what it means to be a professional, that's not something that you can just sort of give an assignment and assign some points and check it off. It's a process, and so the use of formative assessment is really key in that process. It's about students learning to speak like a professional, to do short little sort of educational presentations, if you will, to a small group of students, so their classmates. And then they have an opportunity to give each other feedback on those presentations. The first year students that I teach are way at the very beginning of that process. One of the things when you're designing sort of educational experiences is you have to think about where your students are, right? Teach the students you have, teach the students where they're at. And so this exercise that I've incorporated into my class is just one piece of that professional communication process. But by providing that sort of limited structure and then providing structure like using a rubric so that the students can give each other feedback, that helps the students learn both about the process of the communication and the process of giving feedback, which is itself an important professional skill. They're going to be working as team members, they have to be able to work with a team, and so the formative assessment process is itself part of the training that we're providing to the students, right? So the process is the content, if you've maybe heard that phrase, right? But the process of giving feedback is something that they also have to learn how to do. It's a very lab-intensive course, the gross anatomy course. The students are in lab several hours a day, 4 days a week. We have to teach the class in 2 sections just because the size of the class has grown to the point where the fire marshal won't let us have that many students in the lab at the same time. So we have to teach the class in sections. The students work always in groups of 3. The first group is in the lab for, a couple of hours. And at the end of that time, the second section is going to come in and they're going to do the same material. They're going to study the same content. So we have one person from the early group of 3 stay for about 10 minutes extra, and they match up with one of the groups coming in for the second section. That one person gives a 10-minute or so overview and kind of orientation to the material for that day. So it's not formal, it's not rehearsed. At the end of that presentation, this is where Top Hat comes in. The students who gave that short presentation use a rubric to do a self-assessment of their speaking skills. The 3 students that listened to that presentation used the same rubric to give some peer feedback or peer assessment to that speaker. So all of the students do either a self-assessment or a peer assessment, and they use Top Hat. So each of the items in the rubric is presented using Top Hat as an individual question. Students answer the question, so the data is all collected into Top Hat. And then at the end of that 10-minute or so presentation, the presenter goes on his or her way, and the other 3 students stay in the lab and finish their materials. So later in that day, I, as the instructor, go into Top Hat. I have all this data that the students have entered, answering those questions for that day. And that data then just gets exported into a spreadsheet. I do what's essentially data processing. I move some things around. What I'm left with after not very much time, because you can automate this pretty easily, is some nicely formatted bits of data that I can copy and paste into an individual email that goes out to each presenter. So the same day that the students gave one of these informal presentations, they'll get an email that has their own self-assessment data in it, and right adjacent to that, the peer assessment data from their 3-person audience. I've been doing this exercise in various forms for, 15 plus years now, with multiple classroom response systems. And we adopted Top Hat in our college about, I think it's been about 4 years ago, and that has made the whole process much easier and much more seamless, I think, both for the students and for me, just because of the interface and how much easier it is to present the questions to the students. They can just look at the pieces of the rubric on their devices, which of course they always have with them, right? They never forget to bring their phones. So that really cuts down on the, well, I can't do this today because I forgot my clicker or whatever. What I know from being on the instructor side of it, all this data passes through my hands. The students actually get better over the course of the semester in doing these brief professional communications exercises. And I know that because I can look at all the data that we collect in Top Hat. I have both the self-assessment data and importantly, the peer assessment data. And I can see that the average scores for each of the items on the rubric improve over the course of the semester for both the self-assessment data and the peer assessment data. I like the data. I love working with spreadsheets, but that's not the point, right? The point is not just to do things that I enjoy, it's to do things that are really working for the benefit of the students, and that's what the data tells me. And so this is why we continue to do this particular exercise, or this is why we have made the shift from traditional lectures only to more active learning things that use things like a response system like Top Hat in the classroom, not just because it's fun and geeky, but because it actually helps the students learn and do a better job at the things that they need to be able to do.